Good evening. We continue in Perek Yud. We're beginning actually a brand new chapter, which is the 10th chapter of Shaarei Emunah. That's on page Pei Zayin. The Alter Rebbe begins, Ach mikol makom, nonetheless from what? Obviously is coming from the previous chapter, which you could even say Ches and Tes, the 8th and the 9th, even though we mentioned time and again that in the overall writings of the Alter Rebbe, the sequence, the organization of the Alter Rebbe's compositions, namely the Tanya, is extraordinary. The precise sequence of one's chapter after the other. You don't necessarily see it right then, but you learn it time and again. You realize you can even appreciate the maximum precision of the Alter Rebbe's choice of the sequence in his works. In other words, the sequence in the chapters, focusing at this point on Tanya in general, and particularly in Shaarei Emunah, as we mentioned many times. If you go through the chapters, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled introducing a new phenomenon based on that question towards the end of Gimel, if you remember the third chapter, and then Hey, unique chapter on its own, Vov bringing that message to maximum clarity and really bringing it home in Perek Zayin, and with this Alter Rebbe Zayin being a very a longer chapter, as it once the Alter Rebbe brings this message home. This, which he began in Perek Daled, he elucidates and explains in detail and articulation a few of important matters associated with these, you could say, controversial, because they were controversial among Ge'eni Yisrael, but in the end of the day, matters which are associated directly with that clarity in the oneness of Hashem, the transparency in the oneness of Hashem, which comes through that very message. Famously, Tzimtzum is not Kipshute, which obviously the difference of Tzimtzum Kipshute and not Kipshute, we spoke about it then in Perek Zayin, is extremely enormous. We could appreciate even on the onset of listening to these words, Tzimtzum not Kipshute, Ato Acheleni V'Reilam, Ato Mishnibra Eilam. Again, we spoke about this in length in the 7th chapter, which Alter Rebbe touches upon this message. And then from there to Ches and Tes, you can say that definitely it's coupled together, these two chapters. And Alter Rebbe begins the Ach mikol makom from this message of Ches and Tes, culminating with this chapter Tes. So we had quite a few classes on these two chapters. It's really a click away. We try, as we mentioned time and again, we make the effort that the time is utilized right, that in the present class it should be of the present information, not to recap, not to take much time to recap of the previous classes. Namely, it's really a click away wherever you're watching this, but namely on the original website, Tanya Online. We mention it time and again, namely for the newcomers, Tanya Online, one word, tanyaonline.com. As this class, as you can see, there's a separate scroll bar for the text, as such easy to follow. The other classes come up in the same fashion. So you want to know what the Alter Rebbe is saying, Ach, nonetheless, click to the Ches and Tes, and towards the end of Tes, where the Alter Rebbe is coming from. But nonetheless, there's a famous expression, Patur b'lei klum yafshir. It's hard to, I have to get used to it. Understandably, not holding there yet, but maybe just a bit of a few words prior to the Ach, and what is the Alter Rebbe contrasting, or what is he saying nonetheless of what? So basically, in a few words, in a nutshell, the Alter Rebbe comes across towards the end of the 9th chapter how the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not something that you could adequately appreciate with your own mind. Alter Rebbe concludes the previous chapter, the Roza de Meinusa, the secret of Emunah, and he says, Emunah shelamayla min haseichel. It's faith which is transcendent of intellectual comprehension. And here you're talking about midas, again, which are defined one way or another, Chochma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Ched, Yisod, and then ultimately Malchus. Why would there be associated with Emunah? Why is it faith? These are kind of described. And and defined expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chesed, kindness. Why is kindness emunah l'mayla min haseichel? Even Chachma, even Bina. Understandably, you're talking about the Chachma, Bina, Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Correct. And the Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it's attributed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's obviously not something that you could really define adequately, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is beyond definition. But nonetheless, why would we say it's totally about emunah l'mayla min haseichel, completely beyond the minimal appreciation of these midas, or even Chacham Bina Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Why so? So Alter Rebbe explains that in the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu on his own cannot be defined, nor of Chachma, even b'derech shlila, in a manner of negation. Again, you got to see what Alter Rebbe says in this chapter test. So richly presented. Even the shlila, it's absurd to even say HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Chochmah is so deep that it cannot be perceived. Kol Hashemei Yitzchak Lei, it becomes a mockery. Even that, how Hashem is removed in essence from Chochmah, from Bina, from Das, and from all his midas. Conversely, Hashem unites with them in a way that when we say Hashem and his Chochmah, famous Rambam, which is the beginning of Ches, in Perek Ches, it's echad, it's one. It's not an achdus hamurkevet. It's not an achdus murkevet. It's an achdus pshuta, meaning to say, in essence, as much as we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not that, and it's absurd to define any Hashem with any definition. Nonetheless, the Hashem is misiachid. He becomes one with all these definitions, all these midas, starting from Chachma, from Bina to Das, and so on and so forth. So there's something doesn't really resonate. It can't make 100% sense of it. Again, and this is the message of the end of Tess, and therefore the Alter Rebbe uses the term brings from Zaire that at the end of the day, these midas are raza de memnusa. They're the secret of emunah l'mayla min haseichel. Because at a certain point, you're going to get stuck and you're going to have to realize there's something beyond comprehension which is transpiring here in the context of Hashem and his 10 spheres. Again, click away, you could see it. To appreciate it again adequately, we're just throwing just a few tidbits of the previous chapters, namely Ches and Tes, and more specifically the end of Tes, where from here the Alter Rebbe says, Ach, nonetheless. What Alter Rebbe is basically saying, nonetheless, is let's try to, even though they're l'mayla min haseichel, let's try to understand in the end of the day something about these midas. Not that would make perfect sense; they will always remain roza dehimnus memnusa, the secret of emunah, but something that we could a bit more appreciate of these midas. That's the ach mikol mokem. Nonetheless. So, because Torah speaks in the language of man, to soothe, like to modulate, to soothe the message for the ear, what the ear could hear. In other words, many times we find, as an example, Einei Hashem, the eyes of Hashem. The Rashi brings famous Rashi, where Rashi goes through different characters. Rambam also, and famous Rambam in Yesedi HaTorah, he says that Hashem is described with so many descriptions. Why would Hashem describe himself with these descriptions if he's transcendent of that? And the Rambam himself says, famous Rashi also, but the Rambam in Yesedi HaTorah says that all this is just Hashem does it precisely. Dibra Torah, it's not just by chance, but Torah has an objective and goal to speak the language of man. For different things would definitely ultimately resonate because you speak in the language of man, because we are used to and we appreciate and we identify this which we're used to, we're accustomed to. So when we speak about Hashem is looking with his eyes, Hashem doesn't have obviously the eyes that we're familiar with, but nonetheless the message of Hashem's looking, gazing, focusing becomes real. Hashem is excited. Hashem is happy. Chas v'shalom, the opposite. Obviously, these are characters which are usually attributed to the human being or to Nivraim, created beings. Not HaKadosh Baruch Hashem is beyond that, but nonetheless, Hashem speaks in the language of man in order that it should harmonize with the ear, meaning to say that it should make sense, it should resonate, the message should be calling, the message should be real, the message should be tangible, and as such, it penetrates, makes the difference. And ultimately, yes, in the difference in our very relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is beyond all these terminations, terminologies, because in the end of the day, Hashem knows that man appreciates this which man is used to. So Torah itself, Dibra Torah, it's not just anybody which is giving over a message with a parable, a mashal, and so on, and tries to use these terms. Torah talks the Lashon B'nei Adam. And in this case, and relevance to the information which we're learning over here, and therefore, for this very reason, it was given the permission to the wise of truth to speak about Sfiris, B'derech Mashal, in a euphemistic way, and they call them Eiros, which would be lights, literally, Eiros is lights. That through this euphemism, through this parable, through this example, it will be understood to us a bit of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Hashem's midas and his attributes. Meaning to say that if there wouldn't be the Torah, Dibra Torah, Kilashim B'nei Adam, then they would not have the right, the Chachmei Emes, in other words, these truthful Chachamim, or these wise which are associated with the Emes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they would not have the right to call these Midas Eiros, because you're talking about Rosa de Mehinusa. Why are you defining it as light if you're talking about something which transcends any definition, including the definition of light, including the definition of Eir, including the definition of Eiros, when you're talking about all Hashem's midas? But because it was given, because Torah speaks B'lashon B'nei Adam, so these Chachmei HaEmes, which are well anchored in the spirit of Torah, in the sanctity of Torah, so they also had the right and the permission from Torah to call midas, that even though midas are transcendent from any definition, including the definition of Eiros, to call them Eiros. Why? Because this gives us the ability, he says ktsas, even just a bit, to appreciate the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his midas. By calling the midas Eiros, then we can understand and appreciate their oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why so? Apparently, Eiros is a definition. It's a light. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source of light. Where is the ultimate oneness and unity? And why, by calling Hashem's midas Eiros, does it contribute to the appreciation and understanding of that oneness of Hashem's midas with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Again, which is the message in the beginning of Perek Ches, Naltareba bringing it home in Tes, and namely towards the end of Tes, that Hashem and His midas are one. And what kind of oneness? Not a oneness which is more keves, a composition of different ideas coming together, which that would say that Hashem and His Eidos and His midas are not necessarily one. There's Hashem unites, meaning to say puts on that cap of Chochmah, or Bina, or Das, or Chesed, or Gvura, and so on, but He Himself is removed from it, and He Himself, even when He connects with it, it's a composite of different ideas coming together. Comes the Rambam and says, no, Hu Hamadahu Ayedeya. And in the end of the day, Hu Davar Ayedu, He is the information, again, based on the Rambam's clear-cut proof, which the Alter Rebbe elaborates in the previous chapters, We mentioned even last week, Dr. brings this idea in the beginning of the Beis and Dalit, even of Likutei Amorim, the very beginning of Likutei Amorim, this famous Rambam. For the reasons he brings it there, when he talks about the neshama and he talks about the virtue of Torah, and how much more so in Shaykh V'Emunah, which he's trying to bring out the Achdus Hashem, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so this is very important. In other words, the Alter Rebbe brings this Rambam, and he elaborates on the proof of the Rambam that you can't say that it's a combination of different ideas coming together. It's Achdus Pshuta. It's, in the end of the day, total one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who mideisim hu v'chochmasi, Hashem with his chochma, Hashem with his bina, Hashem with his das, and all his midas are truly one. And with and calling these midas oiros contribute and add to this appreciation of these midas with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how they're in essence truly and essentially one. How so? Apparently, when you think about oiros, when you think about lights, even take a candle. Before even you go to the grand light, which is an example, the sun, take a candle. You have the flame itself, and then you have the air coming from the flame. The flame is the source of the light. So the midas, we know they're not independent. As the Alter Rebbe said, the reason why Hashem is called Masha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the beginning of last week's class, Hashem is called Chacham. As an example, he says, not that Hashem in essence is called Chacham. Hashem is transcendent beyond that. Again, that becomes that oxymoron, as we explained. He's beyond that, but nonetheless, he's misyach in a way. V'achtus pshuta. In the end, he is that. But again, not to just throw these words over here. But when you think about the Rambam's message, Masha Kodesh Baruch Hu Chacham, he's not Chacham. Then he said he's misached with Chochmah, and it becomes truly one with him. That's why we mentioned Alter Rebbe writes Lahamin Emuna Shlema, even though it begins on Nigleis Lana. But again, let's not. It's the last week's class. It's worth it to see where the Alter Rebbe, what the Alter Rebbe's message was again in Ches and Tes, namely in the end of Tes, which was precisely the last class. Yes, we began from Masha HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but in the end, when we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for example, so he's called Chacham. Why? Because he is the source of Chacham, and not he is Chacham. He is the source. There's no other source. Okay, we can make sense of that. There's no other source. When we see Chacham and all of the Eilamis, starting from Atzilus, and then all the way down to Asir, even Chochmah, L'havdil, you can even say by the human being, the fact that he has Chochmah, there's no other source other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is transcendent of Chochmah, yet there is no other source than HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Chochmah, than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So okay, the Ma'ir, which is the candle, in this case, right, the micro Ma'ir, if you will, the flame itself, and then the light coming from it. Okay, so what is the source of the light? It doesn't have any other source. The source of the light is the flame. Granted, the source of the ray of the sun is the sun. Understandable, right? When you don't have the sun, there's no ray. So you see the constant dependability of the ray to the source, to the moir, to the illuminator. In this case, the light, and again, in the talking about a flame, the oir, the light, the ray which comes from the flame, doesn't have any other independent source other than the flame. So granted, you see the connection. There's total dependability, but dependability and oneness is in other words, dependability is a far cry from ultimate oneness. So why, what does it mean? What is Alter Rebbe saying that the Chachamim called the Midas Eidos, that we should be able to understand and appreciate the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his Midas? I'm just gleaning from this that the Midas have no other source. They come and they're constantly dependent on the Moir, which would be the illuminator, in this case, the source of the Midah, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that the Midas are always dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, you could say they're always connected. And there's beyond just a connection, a constant dependability. But where do you see the message of that all-encompassing oneness? So Alter Rebbe says, based on what Alter Rebbe told us in third chapter, if you remember, and it's mentioned myriads of times, many times throughout Alter Rebbe's writings, and what Alter Rebbe wanted to explain the nefesh hasichlis, in other words, it should resonate by the human mind, that ultimate perfect oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with everything, but in this case, focusing on Hashem's midas, that this very ray, this very oir, if it is present out of the flame, if it's present out of the ball of the sun, how much more is it present within the ball of the sun? How much more is this ray within the flame? If it's able to express itself out of the domain of the sun, in the context, if we say in Lashon of Gemara, in Lashon of Torah, Kol Shkim V'Kal V'Chaymer, how much more so is it so present within the ball of the sun? This very oir is definitely within the flame if it's able to express itself out of the flame. So this, when they called the Midas Eiris, they were referring to the source of the oir. But not only the source of the oir would be the moir, the illuminator, but this very oir, the way it's in the moir, in the illuminator. Now the only thing is, I try to look in the mirror. I didn't see any oir. I didn't see any light. I just see the illuminator. You're talking about the luminescence of the sun, for example. The ball of the sun. I tried to look in the sun. I know that mathematically, if it's able to express itself out of the sun, it must be present within the sun. But I looked in the sun. I didn't find it. You didn't find it because it wasn't visible. It wasn't identifiable, because what is overwhelming within the moir, within the sun itself, is only the sun. This same oir, mathematically, in other words, you make the calculation, you must say it's inevitable that it's in the moir, it's in the sun, in the illuminator, within the ball of the sun, that is. But it's there, but it's not visible there, because what is visible and what is overwhelming is just the moir, just the ball of the sun itself. And this is the achdus which the Alter Rebbe is pointing out over here, and this is what the Chachmei HaEmes had in mind when they called the Sfiras Eiris. Not only to the Sfiras, the way they come to expression, Kaviyachal, when they stand out of the domain. You can't, as Alter Rebbe says in Perek Gimel, you can't say that because there's no place which is out of the domain. But it comes to the sun, as the Alter Rebbe emphasized in the third chapter, which is very relevant over here, that when it comes to the sun, there's a space where the sun stops. As grand as the sun is, the Rambam says it's 167 times grander than planet Earth. It's huge, but at a certain point, it stops. And then the ray becomes visible, becomes identifiable. But when it comes, so you say, the oir, if it's out of the mo'ir, out of the sun, for sure it's within the sun. But within the sun, you can't identify it, which again is something which then, this is a parable, a euphemism, which tells us, explains to us, the ultimate achdus of everything, but in this case the midas, which are called the eires with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What type of achdus? Not only an achdus of oneness, that it stems from it, it comes from it, it's totally dependent on it, yet two different ideas. That's not the full image of achdus, but much more so the eires, the way they're in the ma'ir, in the illuminator, and there they cannot be seen because really they're really part of, and the only thing you can find is the Ma'ir itself, which is again the ultimate unity, not only dependability, but unity, true oneness with the Ma'ir. But that's when you're talking about the sun. When you're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there is less asar panim minei, there's no domain which is devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can't say the Ma'ir, Hashem's Ma'ir, Hashem being the Ma'ir, the source, in the number of places, not to go into it now. The Rebbe once elaborated on this, and one of the famous Fabranians or Sikhs, that in the end of the day you can't even call it Chas v'Shalom to call Hashem Mo'ir, because Hashem Mo'ir is associated with light, and Hashem is beyond even that definition. Not to go into it now. Now we're talking about, yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu being the source of light, which is the Mo'ir, and as such, when we speak about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no place where you can say, it stopped. And then comes the ayr, this which we can appreciate if it's the midas or anything else. Now focusing on the midas, Hashem is everywhere, and therefore the midas are always one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but truly one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Alter Rebbe's message over here. It's Kin Yichudei Hashemesh Sebeseich Guf Kader Hashemesh. Not the way it expresses itself out of the ball of the sun, but within the ball of the sun. Im Guf Hashemesh, with the sun, Jenikra Moir, which is called Moir, the illuminator, because it was a Moir HaGodl. When it comes to the sun, it says as a Moir HaGodl, not the Eir HaGodl, but the Moir, the Eir coming from the Moir, and when the Eir is in the Moir, you can't identify it, you can't see it because it's truly one. Is it there? Maybe it's not there. Maybe it just begins out of the Moir. But Alter Rebbe says make it mathematically, meaning to say it ought to be so if it has the koyach. And this is the Alter Rebbe emphasizes many times when he speaks about this mashal. If it has the ability to express itself out of the ball of the sun, how much more so is it within the ball of the sun? The only thing is, within the ball of the sun, you only see the ma'ir, you can't identify it, it's not visible, which is again a demonstration of its ultimate unity and true oneness, not only dependability, but true oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then this ray, and this spark which emanates and shines from this ma'ir is categorically called Eir, like it says, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu called Eir Yaim, because this was the ray which brought day, which brought light to the world. However, when this Eir is in its source, in the Baal of the sun, in the body of the sun, is one with the body of the sun, with the ultimate oneness. There's only one core, there's only one entity, which is the body of the Moir, of the illuminator, HaMeir, which shines, because this ray and this light, Sham, within the ball of the sun, is one in essence one, and essentially one with the body of the Moir, of the illuminator, HaMeir, which shines. And it has no entity and identity on its own, as we can all understand and all appreciate, as we can all understand and perfectly appreciate. In the same exact manner, and Alter Rebbe says v'yesim is then even more than that. And why would Alter Rebbe say more than that, even though this seems to be a very accurate example? Because Alter Rebbe is basically saying that in the end of the day, everything, when you bring a mashal, you bring a metaphor from Elam Hazeh Gashmi, from this physical world, which by definition is finite, even something so grand of a creation like the sun, and it seems very accurate. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, you're dealing with a finite reality. And never will anything finite be a perfect example of something infinite. In this case, lahavdil, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Alter Rebbe says, on one hand, mamash, it's something that you can appreciate, even as an example, and it makes perfect sense. Nonetheless, the Alter Rebbe adds, it has to be beyond that. And what is this example telling us? That Hashem's midas, Hashem's rotz, and Hashem's desire, and Hashem's wisdom, in the world of Atzilus. Now, why would Alter Rebbe mention the world of Atzilus over here? The truth of the matter is, maybe mention Elam Abriya, because you talk about Elam, where is the real beginning of Elam? The Gemara says Elam is Melashon Elam Esther. It covers up over the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's by definition Elam, and it includes every single Elam. Nonetheless, Bria is, in the terminology of Kabbalah, Haschalas Hayesh, explained in Chassidus. There it's Bria Yesh Me'ayin. The world of Atzilus is still a world, is a Lashon of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Number of places it's Bechlal Elam Ein Sof, as we spoke many times. The difference of Atzilus and Bria, it's not just one world over, it's a world which in terminology of Kabbalah, in the writings of Kabbalah, it describes Elam Atzilus as a world of Yigur Chara, there's no evil, but obviously we're not talking about evil as trouble, because that obviously doesn't exist, nor in Elam HaYitzira, nor in Elam HaBriya. How much more it's in Elam HaBriya? Remember, Yitzira is the world of Gan Eden, the domain of Gan Eden HaTachtein, Elam HaBriya, the domain of Gan Eden HaElyon. The Alter Rebbe explains there, nonetheless, there's Ascholos HaYesh, the beginning, the fact it's Yeshvin, V'nehenin, as the Alter Rebbe explains in different chapters in Likutei Amorim, Neni miziv hashchina. This all doesn't exist in the face of the Ein Sof. Conversely, Elam Atzilus is a world which houses the Ein Sof. It expresses the Ein Sof. Every midah of Atzilus, as explained a number of times, expresses itself in a very much of a believable manner, because again, the spirit of the Ein Sof is very much manifest in Elam Atzilus. Therefore, Elam Atzilus is called Bichlal Ha'Elam Ein Sof. It houses the Ein Sof. It expresses the Ein Sof. Every midah has a certain believable, infinite dimension to it. Lo yigur chara. There's not even subtle yeshes. Subtle yeshes would be the is reality, which that begins subtly in Elam Abriya. The whole is. It could be again nenin, hana, pleasure. In the face of the Ein Sof, really nothing can exist. Anything even spiritual and sublime, but nonetheless, it's something which is unfolding and happening. The is doesn't exist in the face of the Ein Sof, because everything is bottle, everything is completely annulled in the face of the Ein Sof. We spoke about this so many times. And Bria is the very beginning. It's called Aschalas HaYesh. Bria is Yesh Me'ayin. Conversely, Elam Atzilus, it is a world which La Yugur Chara. There's not even a subtle idea of Yesh. It's all a world which is bottle, completely annulled in the face of the Ein Sof. So why does Alter Rebbe use Elam Atzilus? Because in the end of the day, you have this duality, and Alter Rebbe is precisely talking predominantly about Elam Atzilus. First of all, it's an Elam. And we say Elam Lashon Halam V'Ester. The Gemara says Elam Lashon Halam V'Ester, and Atzilus is called an Elam. Because in the face of Ein Sof, you can't even have Atzilus. And again, without the tzimtzum, we spoke about this so many times. In the end, there is Atzilus. But that's because it's tzimtzum arisha in the original contraction. But again, not for now. So the Alter Rebbe uses precisely Elam Atzilus because in the end of the day, Elam Atzilus is an Elam. And you say Midai is Chesed, Gvura Tiferes. Chesed is not Gvura. Gvura is not Chesed. Despite it has a certain bli gvul, it expresses itself with it. And it manifests with infinite expressions of the infinite Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but nonetheless, it's a midah. Remember, midah has a translation. Midah means measurement. So is it measurement the way we appreciate measurement? No, it has a certain Ein Sof expression, but nonetheless, it's a midah. It's chesed, and chesed is not gvura, and gvura is not tiferes, and so on. These are the definitions and descriptions. So we're talking about Tzaynu Chmasei, the Alter Rebbe says Ba'elam Atzilus. And as well, the other reason Alter Rebbe speaks about Elam Atzilus is because, to the contrary, he's trying to talk about an Eir which is truly one with the Meir. And that really also precisely happens with Elam Atzilus, in the Eiris, in the Midas of Elam Atzilus. So there's the precision on both ways. On one hand, Elam Atzilus is still an Elam. We spoke about this many times. So it's a step away from the Meir, from the illuminator, which means the Atzmus, Mahusi, Atzmusi, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which would be in the example, the Baal of the sun, the Ein Sof, as Alter Rebbe says, Mahusi Atzmusei. Atzilus is not Mahusi Atzmusei. Atzilus is an Oyer. It's an emanation, not a creation, but yet an emanation of this Meir. And in the same token, the Oyer is pure and unadulterated, and not tainted at all. Lo yigur chora, and the Eiris of Atzilus, the whole structure, the whole mitzias of Atzilus is pure of any even subtle yeshes. And therefore, hence the dveikus, the connection of the Eir, precisely of Atzilus, in the Meir, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But here the Alter Rebbe says, and again, one reflects the other. The Eir expresses the Meir, because again, you're talking about the purity of Elam Atzilus. But here the Alter Rebbe says, the message is beyond that. The message is that the Eir, not only the dveikus into the Meir and the constant dependability in the Meir, which is also some form of union, but yet two separate entities. The Alter Rebbe says namely the message why the Chachmei HaEmes called it Eir is to tell us the next step and the next dimension, which demonstrates the true and absolute unity, the absolute oneness, where the Eir is within the Meir, the Eir is within the illuminator, the Eir is within its own source. And more so, this is the initial state of the very Eir, when it's in the Meir. The fact that it extends itself out of the Meir, that's kind of the second stage of the Eir, of the light itself. The main domain of the light, of the ray, is when it's within the Meir, within the illuminator. But yet it cannot be identified. As such, the absolute oneness with the Meir, with the illuminator. As the Alter Rebbe continues, together with the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Moyer, which invests in them and unites with them with the ultimate unity. Because it evolves and emanates from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similar to the way it is. And again, this would be the example of the way the light emanates from the sun. But the Alter Rebbe says, not in this very fashion. And the reason the Alter Rebbe is saying this, because in the end of the day, nothing finite, despite the accuracy of this example, which really a human mind could perceive this in a way that he could make sense of the message of the Alter Rebbe here again, telling us why the Chachmei Emes called this Eidos, to demonstrate that absolute oneness. Nonetheless, because it is a physical example or example of the physical finite world, and here we're talking about the infinite HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Alter Rebbe says it's not mamish b'derech zeh. It's in a way that it's distant and wondrous, literally meaning removed from our perception, because you're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As it says, Hashem's ways are exalted, lofty, removed from our ways. But nonetheless, in order to familiarize the ear, to make sense, it should somewhat resonate with the ear in a way that it should make sense to us. Nishma v'nizbainen, we're able to hear and to perceive, to ponder, to understand from the example, from this very parable of the light of the sun, that is one and is completely annulled in its own source. It doesn't have it doesn't have its identity. It's not identified with its own name. Only the name of its source. So to all the attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ritzein Hashem's Ratzin, Hashem's Chochma, Hashem's wisdom, they're not called and they're not identified with these names. Yeah, but didn't you just call them Ratzin, Chochma, Midas? And they are. It does exist. Ratzin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Chochma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Natzilus, and Charis Chassid, and His Gvura, the Netzach, Tiferet, Netzach, Heid Yisei, Tiferes, Heid Yisei, Netzach, Tiferes, Netzach, Heid Yisei, Malz. It does exist. And that's what Alter Rebbe says. Yeah, Legabe, Anivroim, Elyenim, V'Tachteinim, which we'll leave for the next class, B'ez Hashem. The next week, that in comparison, rather in the face of the creations, superior and inferior, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain in detail. That's where these names are somewhat dignified, in other words, identified. But in its own place, in its core, in the mucker of this very Eir, in its true domain, Eina Eilos B'Shem Klal. There, it's not a Ratzin, it's not Chochma, it's not Chesed, it's not Gvura. It is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How much is it HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Similar to the Eir, to the Ray, the way it's within the sun. It's in its original domain. And one would say its original domain, perhaps there you could certainly identify it, because it would be identified out of the Ray. For sure, it could be identified in its own source. No, in its own source you won't find it. It cannot be identified. The only thing which could be identified is the Moyer, the illuminator itself, the sun itself. And so to the Midas in their core domain, they're Eina Eilis B'Shem Klal. They're not identified with a name, only Shem HaMakir, only the HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And what Alter Rebbe is trying to explain, that is the reason why the Chachmei Emes called it Eiris. Not only to tell us about the Dveikus, the extension of the Eiris reflecting the Moyer, demonstrating the message of the Moyer, bringing the Moyer to manifestation again via the Eir, via the light, and the constant connection, the constant dependability, right? You remove the sun, there is no ray. You remove the candle, you remove the flame, there is no light. Yeah, that's one way of connection. That's one way of one symbol of union and true unity and true dveikus. Particularly when you're talking about the Eiris of Elam Atzilus, an area of Le'Yigur Chara, the Eiris, and carry to a great extent the purity and the emes of Mahusiv Atzmusiv HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet, that's not the real reason why the Chachmem is called it Eiris. Namely, it was to tell us and to bring us into this higher level of union, this absolute oneness with its source, where Eina Eilis B'Shem Klal, they lose completely their identity, and they become one with an absolute oneness in the Moir, in the Illuminator, which is Mahusilat Smusa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu.